Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the SCB Law and Life podcast. I am your host, Mason Rashtian. Today, we have ourselves Jeffrey Kravitz, who is a mediator and arbitrator with LA County. He's been this for over 20 years. He has extensive background in entertainment, intellectual property, and business law. He's known for his hard-nosed empathy, blending practical negotiation strategy with balanced facilitation, handling strong personalities and high-stakes disputes with neutrality and professionalism. Hi, Jeffrey.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on board. I appreciate it.
Oh, welcome aboard. So, can you please give us about a 2 minute background about yourself?
Sure. I'm originally from Newark, New Jersey. My father was a truck driver. My mother was a legal secretary. And I grew up in Long Beach, California, in an area where I was basically blue collar with one lawyer who took me under his wing and said, "Why don't you go to law school?" I did that and spent some time with the California Attorney General's office, migrated to private practice, and eventually became both a litigator in the areas of business law and intellectual property. For the past 5 years, I have been both a mediator and an arbitrator, enjoying doing both.
Can you tell us about the difference between a mediator and an arbitrator, in case somebody doesn't know?
Of course. I like to say that an arbitrator is a judge because he or she is. They make decisions instead of being a judge. While a mediator is more like a psychiatrist. He is somebody who comes into a dispute and talks with people and uses his moral suasion to try to get an equitable result for each of the parties. And I am fond of saying that mediation is 1/3 law, 1/3 persuasion, and 1/3 magic.
Oh, I've seen many of those magics happen, and some of them that don't. In in all the years I've been practicing. So there's other important differences between the two of them, right? One is binding, down is non-binding. Can you tell us about those?
Certainly. When I'm the mediator, I have no authority except my personality and my background. Anything that I suggest to the parties is not binding upon them, and they are most free if they want to go to trial to go to trial. But when I am the arbitrator, unless I do something that is dishonest, anything that I say has the force of law and is absolutely binding upon the parties.
Um, do you have a preference between the two yourself?
I really don't. And it's like saying, do you like steak or do you like salad? Some days I like salad, some days I like steak. I enjoy doing both, and I think that doing both keeps one fresh in terms of interest.
Okay. So which one would be the salad? Which one would be the steak?
Hadn't thought that through.
It'd be different if you said, steak versus chicken, but that's two totally different stuff. Okay.
Well, then, carrying through with the analogy, I suppose the mediation is the salad because it's less heavy duty, and the arbitration is the steak because it's more heavy duty because it's final upon the parties.
Okay, as long as not too fine, well, not too well done. Steaks too well done is not good. It has to be medium rare. Otherwise,
You betcha.
Yeah. So, what kind of disputes do you handle? I know you handle a few different ones, but tell us more about that.
Sure. I have several areas of expertise, but maybe prime amongst them is entertainment. And not surprising, we live in Hollywood for better or worse. And I ended up doing entertainment law largely because of my college roommate. He was a cinema major at UCLA. Come Friday evening, we would go out and see a movie. We would go out and knock down a few brews. And after a couple of beers, I thought he was Lucas and he thought I was Spielberg. He taught me how to critique a motion picture. So when my law firm started doing work for entertainment companies, the boss said, "Does anybody know anything about this stuff?" And I shot my hand up because I knew it had to be more interesting than what I had been doing. So I enjoy doing that, but I also enjoy doing business disputes, which, as you know, Mason, are oftentimes more like business divorces. You get parties who have lived with each other for years, and it was fine and until it was not. And I have to sort out what's going on between and amongst the parties.
Are you able to share any of the clients that you have had in the entertainment business?
I am not able to tell you, except in general terms, what I've been doing. I have handled, for example, the breakup of a couple of rock and roll bands. No, they aren't the Rolling Stones, but you'd probably know who they were. And having said that, it's alike to a business divorce as well because the parties simply are not getting along. I've represented A-level actors, and with his permission, I am entitled to tell you that I represented Smokey Robinson once upon a time, who's one of the most wonderful human beings that I've ever had to deal with.
Hmm. I'm in this for 29 years. I did deal with some entertainers or pseudo entertainers or adjacent, I'll say. And here's what I mean. When I did defense work back in the old days, that's how I started. I was an insurance defense firm,
Right.
right? And we had a case where we were defending a client who had put in an HVAC system in Aaron Spelling's beach house. Candy Spelling had sued a whole bunch of people because she just did not know how to use the system. He went to trial, and we all defended it. She lost. And I did a deposition with Erin Brockovich. I was
Okay.
yeah, because she had bought a place from Tom Selleck's brother, and somebody had moved a whole bunch of trees, and there was water intrusion coming to her home. So let's see, those two I remember for sure, but I think that's about it as far as I remember.
Well, and again, there are any number of ancillary
Yeah.
reasons why you get involved with entertainment people. And it really depends on who you're dealing with. Some of these people have the artistic muse, but I've also had clients where it was almost irrelevant that they were doing entertainment. They could have run a steel company.
Mhm.
They're just incredibly good business people.
Yeah. So tell us, what is the upside to going to mediation as opposed to trial?
The biggest upside is if you go to trial, you never know what is going to emerge at the trial. You think you know what's going to emerge at the trial, but there's always something that you didn't count on. Let me give you a concrete example. I was trying a civil rights case, and I was representing a devilishly handsome highway patrol officer. We seated the jury, and in the middle of the trial, he looks at me like he had eaten something bad. And he said, "We got to talk at the next break." So we talk at the next break. He looks at me and says, "I think I slept with juror number 6." And I said, "You think you slept with juror number 6? There were so many." And he goes, "Ugh." And I said, "Look, if you tell me that you did, I go to the judge and we get rid of juror number 6, but I can't go with an accusation." He said, "Look, I'm sure I'm wrong. Let's go to trial." So I had a very good case. The jury was out 2 weeks, and they came back with a defense verdict. Oh my God. I talked with the foreman of the jury, and I said, "What the heck took you so long?" And he said, "We were all agreed from the very beginning, except that juror number 6. She must have had something going on that we were not aware of." That's why you go to mediation, because you have a chance to control the result, and you lose that once you go to trial.
Now, in the beginning of the trial, the judge does ask every juror if they know any of the parties involved,
You betcha.
and she said no, or she didn't raise her hand, I should say, at the time.
Well, she didn't say no. She did raise her hand.
Yeah.
But in fairness to her, she may have forgotten about the situation, giving her the benefit of the doubt.
Huh. She just all of a sudden remembered middle of the trial. Wait a minute. So how can people get a hold of you if they need your services?
Two ways. I work with a company called ARC, which is Alternative Resource Centers, which is one of the prime vendors for mediation. And if it's going to be an arbitration, I arbitrate through the American Arbitration Association. So they're both easily available online, and I am available online through those good services.
Okay. I've used ARC before. I don't think I've used AAA, but ARC I've definitely used. Okay.
Super.
Yeah. So can you tell us about a case that comes to mind that was, I don't know, you helped somebody or meaningful?
Sure, absolutely. There are any number of cases that I could draw upon, but one of my favorites involves something pretty pedestrian, which is rent that was owed to a landlord. And why it was a little bit different was it came about because of COVID. One of the parties was an art dealer, the other was the landlord, and it was several $100,000 that were owed and legitimately owed. And we came upon the bargaining, which you eventually do, where you go back and forth in terms of the various numbers. So we reached an impasse where I went into the one party, and the two contestants were of different ethnicities, which becomes important. The one looks at me and says, I can't offer more money because I come from a very macho culture. And I said, okay. And I went into the other room, and honest to God, the other guy who was of a different ethnicity says, I can't accept less money because I come from a very macho culture. And we were right before Thanksgiving, and I brought the two folks together who were really lovely people. And I said, guys, I understand each of you comes from a very macho culture, but we're coming up on Thanksgiving. And I promise you that your wives are not going to want to hear over the turkey how macho you two guys are. They're going to want to hear that the matter has been resolved. So the two of them looked at each other, smiled, shook hands, and settled the case.
Ah, there you go. Yeah, what do you do when you have those mediations where just one party digs in and just does not want to move?
I have more than one way of dealing with it.
Yeah.
Because it's never say ever, never say never. You have to have different ways of dealing with different people. One of the ways that I do it is if I'm dealing with somebody a little bit older, I will say, do you remember when Johnson was president of the United States, the lead senator on the other side of the aisle was a guy named Everett Dirksen? And they'll go, yeah, I remember that guy. And they were coming up on a major bill, and Dirksen voted in favor of the bill. And he was asked why. And he said, because we must all rise above principle. There are times when you have to look at things from a very practical standpoint. And it's nice to have principles, but it is even nicer to get rid of problems. So that's one way of dealing with a situation. Another way of dealing with a situation, particularly if it's a commercial case, is to say, look, I understand that this case is important to you. I understand that it involves money, but what you need to get into your skull is that we are only dealing with money. We're not dealing with the death of a child. And I usually get a kind of reaction from the person. And I say, I have dealt with situations where it's the death of a child. And I must tell you, you never get over the death of a child. you will get over this commercial situation. And at that point, oftentimes the impasse is broken. I have a third tool, which is for the right person, I'll say, you know what? We don't seem to be making much progress. Why don't you and I take a walk? And there's a line from my religious tradition, which says, change your location and change your luck. And sometimes just changing the location changes the person's perspective such that we manage to get past the stubbornness which has been in the room, because we're not in the room anymore.
Speaking of which, do you do mediations in person or online or both?
I do both. And again, never say ever, never say never. Zoom is wonderful in a lot of circumstances, particularly if I'm dealing with parties in different locations. I had an arbitration where I was here in Los Angeles. One of the parties was in Miami. One of the parties was in Nashville, and another one of the parties was in New York City. So how are we going to get everybody together without spending a fortune? Thank God for Zoom. It works. There are other occasions where just being in adjacent rooms can lead to settlement. Witness the one that I mentioned to you involving the two macho guys. I'm not so sure that I would have settled that case if we had been online. But having the opportunity to bring these two well-meaning people together in the room made all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and there's something else that's important about mediation versus trial, which is a lot less expensive.
Absolutely. And I went to a continuing legal education presentation yesterday by a judge, and he started out by talking about the costs of litigation, which have gotten exponentially more expensive. For example, I don't know if you encounter this, Mason, but there was a time when the court reporters were paid when you go to trial by the state of California or by your federal tax dollars.
I remember.
And now, if you go to trial, you got to pay for that court reporter yourself. And look, they're experts, and I do respect them, but that's not a cheap venture to pay for a transcript. And if you don't pay for a transcript, you can run into all sorts of problems, because if you go up on appeal and if you don't have a written record, you are, in the language of the day, SOL.
Yeah, I don't think you can even do an appeal without a transcript. I find it hard to believe.
I think it makes it impossible to appeal.
Yeah.
And
So
then you got to tell your client, you're running one heck of a risk if you don't have a transcript.
yeah, and that's just part of it. You got the court reporter, but then you got to pay the jury, but then that doesn't include the experts that come into play, and even the treating doctors on my end, the personal injury side. They all want at least 5 to 10,000 just to come into trial to testify.
Just to go into court.
Yeah.
And I had a case the other day. It was the rare mediation where I didn't settle. So I went into court, and one of the parties had to, counsel had to fly in from Houston, and they were expecting a multi-hour court hearing. And instead, the judge was on and off the bench in about 10 minutes. And, particularly he had come in with a whole TSA problem just getting from Houston to here. And somebody paid, and it was his client.
Yeah. And I mean, the other issues are, and I tell this to clients all the time because they not seem to realize, if you're in trial as a plaintiff, you have to sit by your attorney on the bench pretty much the entirety of your trial. So you could be sitting there at trial for 5 days or even longer. You're not getting paid. You cannot ask for loss of income for that time period. Just money out of your pocket, not to mention the aggravation. Comparing that to a mediation, we can resolve your case in 3 hours maybe?
3 to 5 hours. And if I don't have a break at 5 hours, I ask the parties to carefully assess, are we making progress, or are we simply climbing rope for the exercise?
Yeah.
I'm at the point where if the matter's going nowhere and the people have their heart set on going to trial, Mason, that's what that great courthouse exists for. So I'm not going to discourage them from going to trial. By the same token, the statistic I have always heard quoted is that 96% of the cases in Los Angeles County settle. And it becomes a question of when you settle.
Yeah.
And as you've alluded to, sooner is better than later, if nothing else because of the aggravation factor and because of the time cost factor. If we're dealing with people who have better use for their time, and I don't just mean money, it could be simply time spent with your grandkids or your kids. Would you rather be sitting in a courtroom, or would you rather be throwing that football to that grandkid on Venice Beach?
Yeah, this is true. So I know you and I were talking before we got on, and you mentioned you have a similar name to some other people.
That's true. Before I went into mediation, I was always Jeff Kravitz. The only one who could call me Jeffrey was my mother, and only when she was angry with me. But there are two other mediators with similar first names and similar last names, and I decided the better part of valor was to label myself Jeffrey for purposes of mediation and arbitration.
Okay. And then tell me about the English, almost a bloke that you got the call on.
I'm sorry, come again?
Yeah, you said you got a call from somebody with a British accent?
I got a phone call. For better or worse, the lead photographer for the Hollywood Reporter has my name. And I was sitting in the office before my mediation days as a litigator, and I'm answering written questions known as interrogatories. And I get this unsolicited phone call, British accent. And the guy starts out, Jeff, he says, we're down at the beach. We got the booze. We got the broads. Why aren't you down here? And I am thinking, I'm going to spend a day answering written questions or going down to the beach where in the vernacular, it sounded like a heck of a lot more interesting than what I was going to be doing.
There you go. So what do you do when you're not mediating? Tell us about yourself a little bit.
Sure. I do several things. I'm at the stage where I try to work out a couple of times a week. It's good for the body, but it's good for the mind as well. I am in a movie club that I got started during the pandemic. We pick a couple of movies, we vote on the one that we're going to see, and then we have a Zoom discussion at the end of each month. And then I've got a son who I dearly love who lives in the greater DC area. So my wife and I try to get back there as often as we possibly can to see him, his wife, and his two wonderful grandkids.
Do you have a favorite movie genre that you watch?
You know, I am friendly with the gentleman who does the film noir series on TCM. I've known him since he was a high school kid. And I must tell you that I enjoy film noir. And his name is Eddie Muller, and his commentary is oftentimes much better than the movie itself.
Got it. Do you have a favorite movie or series?
Yes, yeah. Have you caught him online or not?
I might have. I have not watched that channel in a long time, I have to admit. I'm doing more and more streaming stuff like everybody else is, but that particular one I have not come across in a while.
Well, you should. Among other things, he does his introduction from a bar in Oakland, and he wears four ties and double-breasted suits to go into the period to be able to match it.
Okay, then I'm gonna have to find him. Yes. Do you like sports? Do you follow sports?
Super Bruins fan. UCLA basketball. We live in Westwood, and I have season tickets to UCLA basketball, following their ups and downs. I had a wonderful time going with two women friends to go watch the women Bruins in their NC2A challenge. They're going to be playing again tonight. My wife and I are going to be watching the Lady Bruins in their quest for the national championship.
Okay. Yeah, I watched a couple of UCLA games in person 30 years ago. That's been a long time. How about baseball season. Dodgers started up yesterday. You a
Um,
baseball fan?
and I bleed Dodger blue and try to get a couple of games in during the course of the year.
So what do you think of this year? I know we just started, but
I think that they are going to be off the good. And as I'm sure everybody is aware, it all depends on how many injuries you're going to have as to whether they're good or whether they go from good to great. But that team is absolutely loaded up, and there's no reason for them not to three-peat.
yeah. Do you have a favorite player?
I
Doesn't
have.
have to be a Dodger. Doesn't have to be a Dodger player, but a favorite
I
player.
must tell you, having grown up in Los Angeles, my all-time favorite player is Sandy Koufax. And amongst the players who are playing now, I must tell you that I'm partial to Betts because I'm built more like Betts than the other baseball players. What makes him incredible is that he's not an incredible physical
Yeah.
specimen.
He's my Sandy Koufax bobblehead, though. So you know.
There we go. There we go. He was the best, at least in my book.
Yeah, I wish I'd seen him pitch, but you know, I'm not that old yet. So,
Well, and you know what? The only thing is that as a longtime Dodger fan, and look, you got to go with the times, but it seems that we get less and less players who are incubated with the team itself. And look, free agency is the way to go. We live in a mixed capitalist society, but having said that, it was wonderful when you could watch these kids coming up and watch them blossom as baseball players.
yeah, I mean Kershaw stayed, so that was one.
He did, and he's probably my other favorite.
Yeah. He was doing some of the broadcasting last night on NBC, so that was cool to see.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And he's a very charitable guy. I don't know if you knew that. He and his wife give a ton of money to charities.
Yeah, I knew that. All right, so please tell us how people get a hold of you again.
Two ways, and they're easily Googleable. If you type in ARC and mediation, the service will come up. If you type in AAA and arbitration, the American Arbitration Association will come up. Make sure that you don't get the AAA automotive people. They might be able to help you with your other needs, but not with your outstanding disputes. And I like to say that when people ask for my elevator speech or what I do for a job, I say I make peace for warring parties. And peace is better than war.
By the way, 10 years ago, did you think Googleable would have been a word?
No, I did not. And if you and I had, we probably would not be sitting here today.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, thank you again for being a guest today. And for everybody else who watched, if you like our episode, please like and subscribe to the SDV Law and Life podcast. As always, we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Okay.